The then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, seized control of British television every Sunday night for a few weeks, and then for several years afterwards, she and John Major and a leather-jacketed Norman Tebbit and assorted vegetables had the undivided attention of anyone who believed that while the first duty of democratic citizens may be to choose their rulers, the second is to hold them in healthy contempt. Spitting Image and its bestiary made the careers of some satirists and finished those of some self-important politicians. Anthony Wall, the editor of the BBC's Arena programme, has just finished a documentary about it. We asked him to take a look for us. His report contains flash photography.
And say it to the whole cabinet. Shut up, Norman! Speak up, man, for God's sake. Say what you mean. You're not on the platform now.
Nigel pinched my pen.
Nigel?
He did.
Is this true? You know my policy on stealing from one's friends? Cabinet. What do we call it when people go around stealing other people's property? You!
A free market economy?
Rubbish! What do we call it, David?
Socialism.
Well done, David.
It knew no mercy. From 1984 to 1996, Spitting Image savaged politicians, celebrities, and anyone else unlucky enough to get in its way. With 15 million viewers, millions more than the Strictly final, the show brought politics to a mass audience. It connected young people in numbers not seen before or since. If the satire of the 60s was broadsheet about issues, this was tabloid.
Margaret Thatcher returns to Downing Street with the biggest
Spitting
majority.
Image was born in a time of upheaval and division. Thatcher's was the most popular and most unpopular government of the century.
Oh, wonderful. Hooray!
The show's rejection of deference was total. No one was safe, not even the Queen.
I named this baby Henry. May God bless him and all who sail in him.
Hello, how marvellous to talk down to you. I'm unemployed.
The impact was enormous. Politicians became defined by their puppets. Thatcher's iron grip on power became an axiom of the time.
Tomorrow belongs to me.
Yes, John Major. You're still in the shit. Who do you blame?
John Major was painted permanently grey in the public imagination.
Widening trade deficit.
What happens if we lose the next election?
We'll merge, David.
The leader of the Liberal Party, David Steele, was never able to recover from the merciless portrayal of him as squeaky-voiced and tiny, literally in the pocket of SDP founder David Owen. The magic was in the production. Caricaturists Roger Law and Peter Fluck combined with TV producer John Lloyd and brought the puppets to life. Spitting Image became a hybrid of Cambridge Footlights, English caricature and Punch and Judy. Most of the production team were television amateurs, but the product was a work of genius.
By the way, Norman, how are your children?
Oh, delicious, thank you, Nina.
Really, Norman, you are a sight. Let me get you someone to blow your nose on.
I committed £60,000 to a pilot. £60,000 at the time was a lot of money. It was certainly more than you'd commit to a sitcom pilot or a game show pilot. It was getting towards drama money, really.
As television comedy, Spitting Image goes probably a lot further than That Was the Week went. You have to go further than that to get people's attention.
Just cut it in a style that will be universally popular.
Certainly, madam.
Some worry that satire today has lost its poke, that today's politicians, airbrushed and blow-dried, shorn of the tribal rancour of the 80s, just don't deliver the comedic goods like Thatcher and her enemies. As media have proliferated, so have the spin doctors, advisors, and backroom flunkies whose job it is to protect their masters from scrutiny. In the 80s, your enemy was mad and bad and plain in view. Satirists today have to fire at more oblique targets. And as politicians have had to give up control of their message and their image to their underlings, so comedy writers have lost their monopoly on mockery to us.
And if we've lost your trust, that's how I hope we can start to win it back.
I think what's exciting now is the immediacy of satire. That because of the internet, because of Twitter, everyone can be a satirist now. When you look at Spitting Image in the 80s, it's got writers, it's got production values. If you're inside that encampment, one of the writers, one of the performers, and then the quality was good. But if you're inside it, that's great. But if you're outside it, then you can't do satire. Whereas now, because it's all democratized, because of the internet, anyone can do satire.
In today's public eye, every politician is a weasel, every celeb fair game. No one enjoys immunity from the loaded tweet. If the British ever were deferential to those in power, that deference is long dead. Spitting Image did more than most to dig the grave.
So, in your opinion, who put the bump in the bump shoo wop doo wop, and who put the ram in the ramalama ding dong?
Single mothers.
Go away.
Yeah.
Well, with us now, John Lloyd, producer of the comedy programmes, including Spitting Image, Blackadder and QI. Edwina Currie was Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Health under Margaret Thatcher, also famously portrayed as a vampire. And Rory Bremner, the comedian and impressionist, is also with us. Obviously, you didn't really hate your caricature, did you? You've got it here.
She's here. She's beautiful.
Which one's which?
She's smiling. She's in a much better shape than yours is, Jeremy.
Well, mine's got its nose falling off.
Yours is actually falling to bits, yes. Yeah. No. When I saw her, I thought, well, that's not too bad, but she has crossed teeth, as you can probably see, and I went straight to the dentist.
But did it hurt you when you saw yourself parodied like that?
I think everybody who was not on it wanted to be on it, and everybody who was on it sort of half wished they weren't, but at least it was recognition.
John Lloyd, do you think that affection like that draws the teeth of satire?
Well, it's a complicated thing. The thing that I think is, as you've seen from those clips, is the forgivable thing about Spitting Image is often extremely funny.
It was very funny.
That it was breathtakingly, outrageously rude, but somehow strangely likable. I was talking to a young Scottish journalist today who said that seeing Major's puppet in grey, eating the grey peas, was the first time he'd actually liked him. So it kind of had a peculiar thing that you sort of, I mean, Tebbit, for example, who's played as the villain in the leather jacket, you know, who once drank soup made from a human body, because if the unemployed are so hungry, why don't they eat themselves? He comes across as, you just can't help liking him. He's a sort of, you know, pantomime villain, really.
What's happened to it all?
That's a very good question. Margaret Thatcher, you've got to say Meryl Streep has let herself go a bit, don't you think? I don't know, I think, well, three things have changed. I think television's changed, so people aren't commissioning satire. I don't think the commissioners now, I don't think they get it. I think in some ways they don't understand satire. The culture's changed, as David Schneider was saying in that film. The culture's changed. You know, we're in this era of banter, and you see in the panel games, it's banter everywhere, and Twitter, and it's immediate, and it's more aggressive. It's a different kind of culture, and also the politics has changed. I don't think the politicians seem to have so much power. There's a lot of them that's quite sort of non-entities, really, although, of course, in your time, one of the great achievements of Spitting Image was making household characters of people like, you know, Leon Britton and Kenneth Baker and Norman Fowler. I mean, they were hardly all brilliant figures, but Spitting Image managed to make them recognisable. That's the point, because
they're actually a lot more interesting in many respects.
Well, they were made to be interesting.
Since their puppet. I mean, when we built the entire cabinet in the first, Charles Denton, who you saw there, the programme controller, somebody said, why are you building all these people? Nobody knows who they are except for Mrs. Thatcher. And I said, they soon will. So people like Norman Fowler and Kenneth Baker were more famous as their puppets and before they were as themselves.
We said the same. That's why the politicians liked it, because if you were on, you would be recognised everywhere and you would be taken actually a lot more seriously because you were on the programme.
You were taken seriously despite being caricatured as a vampire.
I think I was taken seriously anyway.
It was Cruella de Vil, Jeremy.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Cruella de Vil.
And it did have a big effect. It made you sent you to the dentist, didn't it?
Well, it had an effect on Margaret as well. She saw the caricature of her in a very mannish way, with a deep voice and the masculine suits and so on, and she thought, you know what, good idea. And she changed. She became much less feminine, much more dominant, much more masculine, and did very well at the next election as well.
And what about the vegetables?
They did the same, or some of them.
But it was part of a thread, really, that you trace back to That Was the Week That Was in the 60s, Mike Yarwood in the 70s, and Spitting Image in the 80s, where people would tune in and they would see their politicians, albeit in a sort of funny light or a lampooning light, but they would recognise who they are. As John's point, we had the same thing with Alistair Campbell. We said, well, we've got to do Alistair Campbell because that's the important thing about Blair's government. And people said, well, who's Alistair Campbell? People won't know. But you put them on the screen, and people used to write to John, I'm sure, and they used to write to us saying that, you know, we learnt our politics from your programme. And I mean, you know, Newsnight doesn't get 12 or 15 million people like...
Only in our dreams, I think.
Do you remember that guy, Sir Robert Armstrong? Do you remember him?
Yes,
the guy who said...
economical with the actuality.
We had a tip-off, Roger Law and I had a tip-off from Paul Foote 2 years before. He said, this bloke, Robert Armstrong, is going to do something terrible one of these days. You have to have a puppet of him. And we kept him in a cupboard for 2 years, this amazing puppet. And then when he did his thing, Spitting Image was off air and we couldn't use him. It's the most infuriating thing.
Let's come to the question of television commissioning in a second or two, but with the current bunch of politicians, they do seem a rather colourless lot. Would it be possible to satirise them in the same sort of way?
Well, I pinch Rory's line, which they say, can you do Nick Clegg's voice? And he said, even Nick Clegg can't do his voice. But I think there is, the spin doctory thing is really good. Watching your films earlier today, politicians don't even wear the right tie anymore. They used to know who they were because Tories were proud to wear a blue tie and Labour wore red ones. And now everyone has different ones because I'm really soft, you know. I'm a soft Tory or I'm a tough Labour guy. And everybody's so charming and reasonable. And what we liked at Spitting Image was the Tories were conviction politicians. They said what they meant and they didn't care what anyone thought. And we were the same as television makers. We didn't give a hoot what the newspapers thought. We wanted to do a programme that was terrific and stand by it. And so we fitted each other. Conviction politics, conviction television. You get neither now.
Why are you nodding away?
I think he's absolutely right. I think what Spitting Image did for many of the viewers was it made politics real. Yeah. Which is
and interesting.
You know, that's kind of counterindicated, but I think it was true, and it would be great to see something like that today. You could have all the main politicians just as, dare I say it, just as kind of faceless eggs or something, couldn't you?
I don't think you need a puppet. For somebody like Michael Gove, he could just go on the... He doesn't need it, because he could be his own puppet, I think. But I think we do have conviction politicians nowadays, in the sense we have politicians who have convictions, like Chris Huhne and Dennis McShane and people like that. But the point is that I think it helps... John said it before, that you do need... Satire needs strong ideological, strong politicians, but also that's good for politics as well. Yeah. And it's interesting, the three... most outspoken, most self-caricaturing politicians we have are Michael Gove, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. Now, both Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, for better or worse, are two of the most popular politicians in the country. And I think Spitting Image... I heard of a prep school headmaster who was sacked after a year in the job, and he wasn't sure why he was sacked. He said, why am I sacked? And the governor said, because you haven't managed to acquire a nickname. And it meant that he didn't have an impact. He didn't have, and that's the thing, because politicians from Spitting Image, people knew who they were. I think in a strange way.
What's happened more recently, and I think one of the reasons why politicians are not nearly as well trusted as they have been in previous generations, is they're all actually trying to be like each other, and the public don't believe that. They don't believe that they would all do exactly the same if they got into power. They think that there are differences and that there's a degree of hypocrisy in the presentation. What Spitting Image does is identifies, I think, exactly what they believe in, what they really would do, and puts it double size on the screen.
John, do you think Spitting Image would be commissioned now?
I don't think there's any possibility. You heard Charles Denton say how expensive it was. In the peak of my time, when it was number 3 in the ratings, getting 15 million viewers on Sunday night, 1.5 million more than it took to elect Mrs. Thatcher in 1983, as it happens, just to get that in. But it was the most expensive light entertainment show on television, but it was also the most profitable because they were selling the centre break and the outside breaks for a huge amount of money. And it's what you see now in modern American television. People are prepared to spend tens of millions on the series to get enormous sales. Now everybody's cheese-paring. They want a little budget and they get a little result. And the same with, you know, do you know, we used to, as programme makers, you'll remember this, Jeremy, we used to make programmes that we cared about and we were responsible for. And now so many people are worrying about, will this, will it, what will the Daily Mail think, that you get programmes that sort of everybody, they're all right.
Yes. Do you see any sign of the tide turning?
No, I don't. We had a meeting a couple of years ago, in fact, the BBC with Alistair McGowan and Ronnie Ancona. We were talking about doing a topical satire programme, and I said, well, it needs to have a political edge, and you could feel the temperature in the room drop. It was like, well, this is BBC One we're talking about, and I think that's the climate amongst the commissioners.
They're scared of politics.
I think so, in a way. Sometimes I think they think that politicians are people that they talk to about the next round of broadcast regulations and things like that.
That's kind of self-censorship, the worst kind of thing. That's exactly what Spitting Image was against.
But it engages people. People think, oh, it's cynical and it's, we don't know, all politicians are the same. Satire isn't. I think it engages people with politics, and they learn from it and get a lot from it. It's healthy.
OK, thank you all very much indeed. Well, that's all for tonight. On tomorrow night's show will be...
I know what's on tomorrow night's show. The same left-wing Bolshevik nonsense that's on the BBC every night. Well, no more. Tomorrow belongs to me. We'll be talking privatisation. You'll be first, Jeremy. And who are all these people? Look at all this over-manning. Planning editor? What does she do? Oh, she can go. Barton McFarlane, he sounds like a communist. Who switched out the lights? Arthur Scargill?